This is Tim Bryce with my column titled, Teaching Racism in the Classroom. We have had suspicions about what academia is teaching our youth for some time now. For example, are they espousing liberal dogma as opposed to math, science, languages, literature, or even physical fitness? Recently, I came across some rather hard proof of their intentions in an 80-page PDF document titled Racial Justice in Education, as produced by the NEA, that's the National Education Administration, the largest labor union representing public school teachers. It is widely known the union is very liberal and actively supports the Democrats. To illustrate, according to OpenSecrets.org, the NEA donated $20 million in 2016 to Democrat campaigns. One of its members is Jill Biden, First Lady of the United States. The NEA booklet is touted as supporting racial equality. It states, quote, "Our mission is to advocate for education professionals and unite our members and the nation to fulfill the promise of public education, to break down the barriers of racial equity, and to prepare every student to succeed in a diverse and interdependent world." End quote. Sounds noble, right? The reality, though, is the booklet is to be used by educators to teach students about racism from a liberal perspective. The booklet makes some rather interesting observations. First, they say, systemic racism is so deeply rooted in our history, culture, and institutions that there's no escaping it. Visible or not, its impacts are ever present. That's from page 12. This sounds more like an obsession as opposed to a true problem. I do not believe for a moment that whites live simply to repress other racial groups. This smacks of paranoia. Next they say, quote, "Racism is perpetuated by silence, and silence is complicity. Being colorblind often serves as a pretense to downplay the significance of race, deny the existence of racism, and erase the experience of students of color." End quote. That's from page 15. My translation, you must publicly state you are not a racist every 30 minutes, but still beg for forgiveness. Next they write, quote, "If you are white, you may be used to the privilege of not having to think or talk about race, especially your own." That's from page 15. And, quote, "White people are racially privileged even when they are economically underprivileged. Privilege and oppression go hand in hand." End quote. Page 34. Does this mean whites are privileged simply because of their race? Hardly. My family, for example, came up the hard way. My grandparents immigrated to the United States after World War I, legally, I might add, and worked hard to move up in the world. We never looked down our noses at someone's station in life, but we did expect people to work professionally and productively, assume responsibility for their actions, and behave morally. So I fail to see how this is privilege. Neither did we consider ourselves oppressed. We were just happy to have the opportunity to prove ourselves through the American free enterprise system. Next, we have a definition as to minority or minorities, a term that has historically referred to non-white racial groups, indicating that they were numerically smaller than the dominant white majority. Defining people of color as minorities is not recommended because of changing demographics and the ways in which it reinforces ideas of inferiority and marginalization of a group of people. Defining people by how they self-identify is often preferable and more respectful. End quote. That's from page 33. Well, this is pure political correctness. For example, if your candidate loses an election, you are in the minority, and the majority won. The use of the term is about numbers, not race, and I bitterly resent their insinuation. Next, we have another definition. Illegals. Many outlets have changed their style guides to stop using illegal as it applies to immigrants. End quote. And this is another attempt to impose political correctness on the masses. In this situation, did the person try to enter the country lawfully? If not, it is an illegal attempt to gain access to the United States. As such, it is a perfectly legitimate word. Check any dictionary. Next, we have another definition. Quote, racism. Historically rooted system of power hierarchies based on race, infused in our institutions, policies, and cultures that benefits white people and hurts people of color, end quote. That's page 35. This again implies only whites can be racist. which simply isn't true. I have traveled the world extensively, visited many cultures, and found racists just about everywhere. To suggest whites have a monopoly over this is ludicrous. In reality, this is an attempt to make whites feel guilty about being white. Sorry, but I simply do not buy it. Next they say, quote, talking about racism is just a start. Taking action is the biggest driver of change. Create opportunities and strategies to move from awareness and analysis to action and impact. You and your students can go beyond the classroom by advocating for equity in your school and school district. Speak up and speak out. Be intentional about supporting more voices and leadership of people of color. And be proactive by proposing bold and concrete solutions that embody the values and visions of equity and inclusions for all, end quote. That's from page 20. Well, shucks. And here I thought the purpose of public school was to teach math, science, languages, and so on. I never realized it was intended to train students to become revolutionaries. Such discussions belong at home, around the dinner table, not in schools. The DEA booklet goes on to promote left-wing policies such as eliminating police from schools. That's on page 52. Join state comprehensive immigration reform campaigns. Page 58. Support Black Lives Matter events and efforts to remove public symbols of racism and white supremacy. Page 63. Start or support a campaign to remove statues or change school names that celebrate white supremacy or demean people of color. That's page 63. But by whose definition, I would ask? And finally, we have fight voter suppression and voting ID requirements. That's page 75. The NEA booklet is strictly political dogma of the left and has nothing to do with teaching a normal curriculum, which is what the taxpayers pay for. Instead, it is an instructional manual to teach students how to become liberal fighters. I certainly do not deny the existence of racism, but it is certainly not limited to the United States, nor is it applied by a single race, but by all races. It is apparent to me that whoever actually wrote the NEA paper hates whites and possesses some rather intense anger issues. It is far from fair and balanced. Instead of trying to transform our youth into revolutionaries, I would much rather see a curriculum teaching them their constitutional rights, which expresses their individual liberties and equality. But that is not what the NEA is interested in. Instead, they are more interested in inflaming racism for political gain. At least we now know of one source where this type of nonsense is coming from, the NEA. Here at last is tangible proof in black and white on how the left is trying to mislead our youth. Parents should now try to find out who is using the document in the classroom. School boards should be asked this point blank. I'd like to close with a tip of the hat to old friend Rick Trader of Conservative Commando's radio show for the lead. Friends, keep the faith. This is Tim Bryce in Palm Harbor, Florida. Follow me on the internet at timbryce.com.